Welcome to the Fan-peckled launch event from Fair Acre Press. I'm Nadia Kingsley. First of all, I should apologise to say I started recording a few minutes late, so we miss a couple of poems, but I'm going to make up for it, well, try and make up for it now. This event occurred on Zoom in March 2021, and now I welcome everybody on YouTube to watch it as well. We're very happy to welcome you in. The first poet to start is a wonderful poet called John Sewell, who has had a couple of collections out before now. And one of them was actually by Cape Poetry. So Fair Acre Press feels very honoured to have published him. And the book is Woods River Road. It's actually been endorsed by John Burnside, who happens to be one of only 3 people, Ted Hughes and Sean O'Brien are the other 2, who has won 2 of the very main awards for the same book. Not, they didn't all write the same book, but his book. And what John Burnside says about John Sewell's book, Woods River Road, is this. Woods River Road is wonderfully erotic, an earthy, pagan, vital celebration of sexual love and of the land that, as the poet says, always remembers how vast in happiness love is, how loving grows with every love we have. And as you may imagine from the title of the book, it is in 3 sections. John reads from each of the sections, but as I say, I'm afraid I missed the first couple of poems, but to make up for it, I'm going to read a couple of my favourite poems from the Woods section, the first section. And this one's called Cherries. You, spooning a mango or wiping the sex of a peach from your chin. Then next day, adamant that apple, no nonsense apple, is as far as you will go. Things paired are things kept sweet, like governors on engines, the twin stalks of cherries. I halve the bag, give you first pick. Stripping wishbone after wishbone, you wish, my wish. And I'd like to read this one called Laid Paper. Here's a seal, a dandy roll to this pure sheet. You'd finished writing, went upstairs to add a special touch, effuse a postscript just for me. 2 beads of clearest lust, distilled onto a page whose bed is all imagination stained. Let me reciprocate with this small blob of ruttish opaline. Too little, nothing shows. Too much, and it dries phosphoric. Too scattered, and the wet sheet printed on its mate will blot the splattering, but leave a worn-out, cockled look, which isn't what I had in mind. This is sex by origami, laid paper. The brown manila wings across my lips. I badge it with my tongue tip and it flies. Thank you. And so now we will segue into the recorded live event with John Sewell reading from his book. You will also hear from Jean, Atkin and Katy Alston, whose Fan-peckled pamphlet is launched in March 2021, and also Carl Tomlinson and Steve Griffiths. They all, I can very proudly say, been published by Fair Acre Press. Thank you.
Here is the first time they make love. It's called Before and After It Happened. This morning, I rinsed your cup out in the sink, ran my fingers round the rim and down inside. While it was happening, all I could think was, seeing your head on my pillow, this is what it is to have no wishes left. So how will the kettle, half an hour later, give the impression nothing has changed? This one's from when they're in the throes of passion. The chair. In the backyard for weeks now, facing the wall. 2 plastic stacking chairs. A red one mounted on a grey. Their legs aligned, the seat of one tipped forward slightly on the other. Each time I pass, I glance their way. The fox and vixen screaming nightly, all night for release. You and I in the full height bedroom mirror. Things start to go a little wrong, and this one's called Dead Reckoning. I need time, she says. This justifies anything she cares to name. Let's leave it for a while. Those August evenings, he searched out her car, notes, sweet peas beneath the wiper blades. Last week, she paid him back by not walking the 20 yards it took to do the same. He's a 3-year-old that's close on 50. He's sly, mixed up, and must be punished. She gives him time to write out all these lines. He killed a lamb once, pressed its head into a pool until the bubbles stopped. Astonishing how long a weak, crow-blinded thing can cling to life. Have it your way then, it's finished. The look she gave him then, a fool might call it love. I'll read this one because it describes the same time of year as we're in at present. Wood hush. What is there about March? I asked. Why you love it so much? What she said as much about herself. The trees, she said, are at their most beautiful. I stared as if for the first time at wind-bared oak, skylined ash. See, she said, the added definition each twig has. It's not the light, but the latency light brings. Like candles at our bedside, hint at what comes next, precisely how that feels. And the thrill of that as strong or stronger than the thing itself. She stopped, and I saw the way when we make love, she stops mid-breath to stare transfixed, as if at trees, whose every leaf of every leaf is suddenly, in one quick moment of release, released and shaken out. It's then, I said, saying as much about myself. You are at your most beautiful. And lastly, a renewal and a reconfirmation. Late matinee. In a matter of moments, white flame of blackthorn is catching the pulse. White kites lift from the hill's blue wings. So what if I'm not what I was at 40 or 50? The curtains up and somehow rising yet. Soaring light proves every skylark brightly weightless. The high up way it feels in love. The stage 1,000 suns that only blossom now our play's begun. Thank you.
That was wonderful, John. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I can see lots and lots of clapping going on, and some lovely remarks in chat, which you should have a look at some point. Anyway, so now I'll move swiftly on to Fan-peckled by Jean, Atkin and Katy Alston. I first met Jean Atkin when Fair Acre Press was creating its first book back in 2010, which was an art and poetry book on Shropshire butterflies. So it's lovely that the book that we have published together is also an art and poetry book. I've been to several writing workshops, and I'm sure several of you have as well, with Jean, and they have been, she's been attentive and supportive in those sessions, and I really, really recommend those. She was the National Poetry Day BBC Poet for Shropshire in 2019. And I first saw Katy Alston's fabulous work for the first time at the world's first poetry pharmacy in Bishop's Castle, which, if you don't know, is run by the poets Deb Almer and James Sheard. So I'm so delighted to have published Jean and Katy's book, and without delay, I would like to pass you on to Jean Atkin and Katy Alston.
Thank you, Nadia. It's just lovely to be here this afternoon, and thank you all so much for coming. We wish we could give you cake and wine, but hey, you'll have to bring your own. I'm going to start you off. What Katy and I are going to do is I will read a poem, and Katy will then talk to you about how she came up with the illustrations for each one, because it's a process and it's really interesting. Glad to see people have got wine. The first poem, since it's spring and there are birds and birdsong, I thought we'd start with a little poem about the goldfinch. This is a word that was collected in Shropshire in the 1870s by Georgina Jackson, and in the village of Clun, deep in the hills, our Georgina discovered that the children called the goldfinch Lady with the 10 flounces. So you think of a goldfinch with its wings spread. Lady with the 10 flounces flits from oak to ash to thorn. She's the one that hops among the stones. She's quick as daylight. Lady with the 10 flounces spreads her yellow dress and rustles in the hedge like silk in the small hours. Lady with the 10 flounces tips up her red head, and all the curls of rain roll down her back. Lady with the 10 flounces charms with all her pretty sisters at their song, as close as blood and twice as bonny.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Jean. Hi, everybody. I'm going to tell you, like Jean said, about the illustrations. I'm going to wave some books towards you and show you a bit of my sketchbook and all sorts. So here we go. Okay, so Lady with the 10 Flounces. I'm going to put that nearer the camera for a minute. Hopefully some of you will have the book anyway, and then I'll give you a chat about it. Luckily, I have lots of goldfinches in my garden, and so I've got lots of willing models. I'd also done some drawings about goldfinches just a few weeks before this lecture, but so I'm going to show you one of my sketches in my sketchbook. So I started off using graphite and did a few quick sketches. And it's a funny thing, of course, when you look at the goldfinches, they're beautiful and they're quick and they're energetic and they're lively, but we don't see that image that photographers see. We never see that. So I like to draw from life. And so that's quite difficult to catch that. And you end up having this creature that might be a bit trapped. Well, I ran with that. And so I made an image, which is one of these tiles. And then I thought, well, if it's trapped, I may as well really trap it. So I'd done the digital sketch, I'd done the sketch, the graphite sketch, and then I digitally coloured it. And then I did a pattern repeat within the digital app. So it looks like a kind of wallpaper. And I was a bit worried that there might be little gaps between the tiles. I could have gone back and filled them in. But I was talking to Jean about it, and she said, oh, I don't know, it looks like one of those 1950s, that green of 1950s farmhouses. Why don't we keep it? And I thought, yeah, let's keep it. So that was it. Okay, thanks, Jean. Oh, are you on mute?
Yes, there we go. Yeah, the next poem is onomatopoeic. The word from the wonderful Shropshire Word-Book, all these are taken from the Shropshire Word-Book, is click it. And it means the fastening of a gate. And Georgina Jackson collected click it from the little towns of Craven Arms and Stokesay. Browned and smoothed by 80 winters, this click it still holds gate to post, the striker bar solid in the palm of the latch. Kath's breath hangs on the air. She thumbs the cold latch open on a day when silence is weather as much as low cloud is. She hears and doesn't hear the strikers slip away, the gate begin its swing. She steps where her mother stepped and grandmother, out from working garden onto farm track, stock path. And then she turns on the gravel and shuts it, all without a conscious thought. Yet the gate's click it rings like a small high bell and holds her in her memory as if she held their hands.
Thank you. You can have a look at the picture in the book again. So this one I started off, I don't always work in sketchbooks, but at this time I was working in the sketchbook. I did one image, where are we? One image here of our lovely, really modern knot gate in the garden. And then realized that no, what I was after was a lovely onomatopoeic, as Jean said, sounds. So I thought about this poem and I picked up little elements from it. I considered that it was all about memory and that time, with time passing, as are a few of these poems actually, aren't they? And so I tried to incorporate in it all little things suggesting time going by. So the grain of the wood, the weathered wood is standing out, and we've got old paint here. And we've got bits of moss that have obviously been growing there a long time, and the ticket, and another notice about something, and some redundant screws and wire and all of that. So it's mainly dip pen and watercolour, and then I coloured it digitally with the blue just to get a lovely flat blue. I find it easier sometimes to make a digital file, even if I don't do the work digitally, because then it's all ready to send to someone. So we're all done. Okay, with that, I think I'll pass you back to Jean.
Excellent. And I'm talking to you, yes, no mute. Wonderful. Well, the next poem is the title poem. Here we go. We're reading out the book. Lovely book. Thank you, Nadia. And it's this is Fan-peckled. And Fan-peckled just means freckled. And the word was collected in Wem and in Whitchurch. Last night, there were the speckled lakes, on a sickle moon not watched nor wished upon through glass. Then morning fetched a dot dance in the woods, of deckled oak leaves and the bee-pad footfalls, pollen tickled in the foxglove. There was a 7-spot ladybird drawn with a pen, who uncased crinkled wings to fly at the sun. And in the kitchen was the freckled flesh of wrinkled bramleys in the pan, small chopped and pickled. Before bedtime came the counting of the cockle shells, pale, a little barnacled, and cuddled on the step in St. Luke's little summer, Kath's youngest daughter, sweet, fan-peckled.
Okay, thank you. I love this poem because, as I said before, it's like looking at a glimpse back in time. It's just such a sort of piquant little memory. It's my favourite time of year, that little, what is it, little Luke's summer. And this is what I was trying to capture with this. You get, if I bring it closer, you get some nice loose drawing here. I was drawing with a dip pen because at this point, it was the first one I did. And I wasn't quite sure where we were going with this. And I was just having a play, really. And then I thought, oh, I quite like that, might keep that, might use that. I was led to the pen and ink by Jean's, there was a 7-spot ladybird drawn with a pen. So it was life imitating art. So I couldn't not go there. I've got lots of models again for these. I grow foxgloves and I used to keep bees till recently. And we've got loads of ladybirds and things. So I was very pleased about that. I used the digital colouring in the app Vectornator I use. It's like Illustrator, but made by someone else. And I put the teardrop shape on to really kind of zoom a focus in, just like the poem zooms it in, really. I also like to, I like the edges of my work to be shown often. And I like to fade out, like the focus draws into the beginning, into the middle, but fades out to the end. It's how we see things normally. Okay, thank you, Jean.
That's lovely. I think that's very true, and it's how memory works, that we see that small focus and it's a bit hazier around it. Then the last one we're going to do just now, and then we're going to hear some other people, are this one is called Keffel. And Keffel in Shropshire meant a sorry, worthless horse. The book says it's from the Welsh, Keffel, but Keffel in Welsh is spelt with a C and has extra Y's in it. Keffel, this word, was collected in Wellington and Newport and Wem and Pulverbatch, and I thought of the Shropshire Union Canal. So here's Keffel. You need to know that backering, there's another old word which is special to the canal. It was when you had the horse, you left the horse pulling the boat along the towpath without a driver, and this gave the driver a break from walking and a chance to smoke a pipe full of bacca, hence backering. So careful. Monty's backering when it comes about. 5 minutes off to ride the flyboat, take the weight off, light his pipe. Old Royal is plodding on the towpath, just like every afternoon. Monty blows a smoke ring. Royal flicks his tail, as thick and white as winter. His head nods in the collar as he hauls. The coppice roars with thrushes and the water shines its steady road ahead. Wood bobbins rattle lightly round the ropes. that run the length of Royal's skinny flanks. His ribs begin to heave. And Monty's on his feet as Royal stops to cough, and is jumping for the bank as Royal's bony haunches hit the towpath. In the hold is 7 tons of Shropshire cheese. The day's been warm. There's still 4 hours to Ellesmere Port, and the horse is down. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. I'm going to show you a little page from my sketchbook here. I'll hold it. It's difficult to see how much you can see, but I'm hoping it's there. I got very excited about the cheese on this one. I can imagine all that cheese going off, so I was desperate to get that in, but actually failed because there was so much to get in with this one. It's a funny thing. If I show you the end result, here we go. So it's a funny thing that when you're doing pictures for something like this, you have to put in so much research, because there may be, as you've got to know a lot more than you portray. So for example, when I had to look up the wooden the bobbins that go on the long reins, or the ropes around his flanks, because although there's only a tiny little line for the bobbins, I knew that if I got it wrong, because I could have done bigger bobbins, or you've got to know about that. And the old Holborn baccy, I had to know what age I was looking at to see if the tins were different, whether they had old Holborn, and it goes on like that, so you can imagine. So as for the flyboats themselves, I had a great morning looking at all about the flyboats. So I took Jean's poem and I ran with it a bit, because it's a lovely poem, but I've had quite a lot to do with horses in my life, as has Jean, I know, and I felt very sorry for this poor old horse. It worked all its life. I wanted to set it free. So in the image, I did the horse kind of plumping down and dying, sadly, on the towpath. But then in the reflection, his spirit is set free, off to go to sunnier climes. I had to work out what shape the pipes were, and the whole thing. But I really did enjoy doing this one, and I did it with pen and ink. I did it with dip pen, which is quite loose. But then to get the lovely swirls and things, I used the iPad and drew with my finger, so to get that whole arm movement thing going. So it's one of my favoriter ones. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, Katie. That's fantastic. Nadia, back to you.
Thank you both so much, and everyone. We're going to have another piece with Jean and Katy in a little bit, but now we're going to move on to Carl Tomlinson. Carl Tomlinson's pamphlet is his first publication, his first poetry publication, and it's received glowing endorsements from Helen Mort, Di Slaney, and I personally was incredibly pleased with Charles Foster, who wrote the book Being a Beast. I don't know if you've read that. But anyway, part of what Charles Foster says about changing places is, he's got a nerve, has Carl Tomlinson. Most poets dance around loss, desolation, and the presence of the past. He doesn't. You're straight in there with a jolt and a bucket of ice water over your head. But he'll wake you up, and that's terribly rare and precious. So thank you, Carl, for, thank you all for allowing me to publish you. But over to you, Carl Tomlinson.
Thank you, Nadia. Because this is a virtual event, you need to bring your own bucket of water. Toy. Beasts and fields and milk meant muck and sweat and aches, before baths, then tea and bed. Grading eggs was child's play. The chance to operate that bathroom blue, part bagatelle, part bowling alley, where work was done by gravity, in a mood you might call levity. Warm in the palm, the morning's eggs were fed along a gentle slope to roll down chutes which matched their size. Outgrades and breakages didn't go to waste. They were fried for breakfast, baked in cakes. It turns out that my toy was worth more than most men made in a week. It must have saved a lot of work. When I was a kid, when I was a little boy, my grandfather had a farm just north of Manchester, which is very much the centre of certainly my father's family life. The family had farmed there for about 150 years. And one of my earliest memories is of the road between Rochdale and Oldham, the relief road being made, and of earth moving equipment lifting an embankment to carry this motorway over my grandfather's fields. The farm was sold when I was about 8 years old. They moved our sky when they banked up the earth to sling the motorway over the fields. There's a kink in Huff Lane where the bridge dragged it yards to the north. Everyone reckoned it did for the drainage. The puddles and sludge suggest they were right. Dad says folk always knew which was Tomlinson land. Our grass was greenest because Joseph would put his muck back, while others sold theirs for ready cash. This kept the earth rich, so roots went deeper. And a little compensation came for what the tarmac took away. Those riches now are gathered here, by will and trust and deed, in the fields that I tread every day, to check the sheep, or see what's new among the trees which frame the view I sometimes think I own. Actually, that view that I sometimes think I own is the view you can see behind me. It's the cover of the pamphlet, and that's the bottom of one of our fields here in North Oxfordshire. Just in terms of local words, slutch was a word I grew up believing really only applied to the kind of muck and mess that was in the fields of my grandfather's farm, particularly in the gateways where his dairy herd passed twice a day. But it may be a word familiar to some of you as well. So I have two children. They're grown up now. But when they were little, one of the things that we shared was a joy of playing with Lego, which was also something that I shared with my late brother. It was one of the things that helped us get along, because brothers don't always get along that well. And when my children and I were playing Lego, a lot of the Lego that we would play with would be things that David and I had played with when we were 25, maybe 30 years earlier. Present. Birthdays and Christmas meant Lego. Your uncle and me sprawled on the floor, making the kits, then setting bricks free to capture space in canting walls. Between the bursts of energy which shaped our glimpsed creations, in the frustration of scale, the being bound by doors and wheels, then seeing halfway up or in the step we'd missed in the urge to begin. Bits of us, scraped, no doubt, from ear or nose, were smeared into these piles of plastic. This morning, as you two root among them, proffering the perfect parts for me to make a scoop or muck or dizzy, something of those boys lies on this floor, lodged in the teeth marks of hurried demolition, smudging the material of shared imagination. Nadia, how am I doing for time? I can't hear you, sorry.
We're running a little bit late, but good. But that's
Okay.
because we started late as well.
Okay.
You know,
Well, I've
because
got
we
one
have to
more, if
allow
that's
everyone
okay.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect.
Okay. So, yeah, this last poem I want to read is actually the last poem in the pamphlet. I guess for as long as my family have been some kind of farmer, we've been lifting and planting potatoes, or in fact planting them and lifting them. You have to do the first. And that's something I've done with my grandfather and with my dad and with my children. This poem's called Harvest. Oh bugger, the words thud. I've just put a fork through a spud. I'm showing our son and daughter something I learned from my father, which my grandad had taught him before. You start a bit off, away from the green. Keep the fork away from the tubers. You want to lift them, not pierce them. And they'll not store if you fork them. They'll be no good if you fork them. Again the fork sinks. Again the soil shifts. And this time a big un gets stuck on a tine. Oh bugger, I thud, before I'm stood up. And quick as an echo the lad pipes up with, that's what our grandad said, when he put his fork through a spud. Thank you, Nadia, for publishing the pamphlet. Thank you, Jean and Katy, for inviting me to read with you. And thank you all for listening and for your warm response, which I can see across my screen here. That's very encouraging. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl. That was fantastic. Really super. So now moving on to Steve Griffiths. So I've been, probably like a lot of you, I've been happily reading and listening to Steve Griffiths' poetry for some years now. And I was delighted to help bring his newest pamphlet, Updrafts, to Ludlow Fringe Festival last summer. It was, Steve had put a lot of time and work into his poetry, but actually from the day that we discussed, I asked if I could publish it, to the day I sent it to the printers, that was 6 days in total. Cover design and endorsements. Thank you everybody who gave us the endorsements. And that was a lovely, intense experience. Anyway, Nicholas Murray says of Updrafts, Steve Griffiths' poetic voice is distinctive and engaged. And Marilyn Miller says, reading it is like lying on your back and looking up and finding an imagined world. Steve Griffiths.
Thank you, Nadia, and hello, everybody. So yeah, it's a fairly bit of a minimalist book, really. These are a series of fragments, and the first one, to begin at the beginning, it's called First Weeks. I open to my mother's milk. Milk is as light does. The positives of the world are composed from this thin line of unpredictability. No joy, but in recognition and discovery. No resilience, but in the delicate. And I'm going to read the first poem in the pamphlet. It's a Clee Hill poem, a rare poem that I actually wrote in one place and didn't work on for months afterwards. But it's also very much an Anglesey poem. That's where I come from. And it's a poem for my mum. It's called Who Brought Me Into the Light? Those hills in their slow motion undulation, their ripple of shaken plains, their Tai Chi celebratory whip of energy. They are shaken sheets. Who'll hold the corners as they meet and fold? Not my mother. who taught me to grip on in stiff wind so they wouldn't tear from my fingers and trail in the grass. Not my mother, who's long gone, but who showed me the danced pattern of meeting and folding, those waves of light and shadow on land, so quick on the sea, a lifetime where I stand. And this, in comparison, is positively an epic. It had a strange origin. It came from a commission to write some advertising copy for Anglesey sea salt. And my upbringing was just absolutely surrounded by salt blowing in the wind and the sea. And I ended up with far too much material, did the job, but then made a poem with the rest. And I suppose it's a celebration of food and light. Saltings, the taste that sea salt opens up. Its slow white bolt from the blue. The taste you thought just out of reach. The memory you find you never knew you'd lost. Sardines newly caught on the beach. Add sea salt to risotto. It pulls you in towards a chorus of ingredients, the memory of sea beneath them as they make their entrance and they sing. The sea bass thrumming in the undertow, taut as a bass string. Sea salt, summoned where the hawthorns lean right over under the determined salt wind. When you were little, it would hold you up if you leaned back on it. The pleasure of the gust sustained. Blow, wind, hold my body upright, trusting. Behind me the west, my lips awakened to its taste. Once you ran to keep up with a moving column of sunbeams, listening for the washings crack on the line, the whip of sails. Sheets hung out on billows of Atlantic wind. At night, they will enfold your child's dreams of salt, of scales glistening. It's brought in from far out where the sea churns, runs, dances into space, pulled by the moon that brooks no refusal. Crystals of sea salt glisten up from a dish. Light without eyes, snagged on a sightline. Just the salt and the moon. Unconsummated recognition. They're miraculous, those eyes that lock across a meal amid the blind whisperings of light. And that's that epic. I'm just going to end with a tiny fragment. This is urban grit. Exercising flat on my back on the floor, 1 foot in the air, head to the bay window. In the clear blue sky above me pass 3 herons, slow and upside down over Haringey. And that's it, I think. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Steve. Thank you so much. Really, you're so good at reading. Thank you so much. Now we'll go back to Jean, Atkin and Katy Alston. So this is our last section. I don't know, Deb Alma, I don't know if you saw my message that I sent you. I'm going to, after this, I'm going to ask you to talk about the poetry pharmacy a little bit. So if you're out there and listening, just to warn you about that. But over to Jean and Katy again. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. That's absolutely great. Yes, a very good idea to hear about the poetry pharmacy. Wonderful thing. We're going to share now just 3 more poems. The first one is called Talking to Mommets. Talking to Mommets means, according to the Shropshire Word-Book, self-communing in low-toned speech. It was collected in Pulverbatch, and unusually, the Shropshire Word-Book gives us a short example to show how it was used. And in the book it says, and you will just have to put up with the fact that I don't have a Shropshire accent, and I apologise now. I said out Mr. Ambler standing in the lane talking to his mommets. I put Mr. Ambler into the poem that I wrote because I could see him too. Mr. Ambler's in the ivy nave and thinks he is alone. He's looking at our old bronze bells, long fallen into mud. Their mouths are full of leaves, but his is filled with words. I can't hear right from where I sit. I hop a little nearer, out to a thinner twig. I'm brown as a nut, I am, except for where I singed my breast. Mr. Ambler bows before the bells. He's telling them their names. Cuthbert, Hilda, Chad and Bede, Aidan, little Ebbe. All are calling saints whose tongues have stilled. I fluff my feathers in the frost, then fly to find a nook to roost. And I remember what the starlings say, what Mr. Ambler tells the farmer's arms. How Cuthbert, Hilda, Chad and Bede, Aidan, little Ebbe, still peel some nights and swing their heads to chase away the storms.
Thanks, Jean. I'll do what I did before and show you the pictures. This was quite a straightforward image to illustrate. I took just little bits from Jean's poem and added them in with so we got the bells. The bells are mouldering in the churchyard. They're returning to where they were made. As an ex-bell ringer, I'm really fond of bells. I find they're really human, and we talk about them like they're human, with their mouths and their waists and their heads and bowing their heads and all that. They used to make them in our churchyard. There's a depression in the earth where they were cast, because they used to cast them on site rather than transporting them because they were so heavy. So this is what I thought, they were going back to where they'd come from. The twig is also meant to be a bit like a root going through the earth, and this is a little feather, and then you've got the ivy going round. I used Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils for this, and they are worth knowing about because they're oil-based. Most pencils are wax-based, but because they're oil-based, they glide across the surface beautifully. And I used for this one and the next two, I think, the next 2 poems we're going to talk about, I used quite a coarse-grained paper. And this is the idea of it, is to make it feel a bit more intimate and a bit like it's something from the past that you were there a long time ago looking at. Okay. Thank you, Jean.
That's great. Right, the next poem is called Noon Spell. A noon spell was the labouring man's luncheon time. The word was collected in Wellington, and I thought about an odd moment in history which my mother originally pointed out to me, which is that the village smithies in the 1930s to 40s morphed to become local mechanics car mending shops. And I thought about this odd moment of change. So, noon spell. Tom lays down the oil can on wrenched off horseshoes. He cranks the starting handle, cracks a grin at the racket of the two-stroke going, sweet as a nut. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow, the engine smokes on the beat, and Tom wipes his hands on his kecks. Then he twists the lever and knocks off the fuel. Turns to the Shire by the sliding door, who has slept through the din. Tom's not a man to talk, and anyway, his mouth is full of nails. Strokes down her fetlock, heaves a hoof like a loom weight onto his lap. He grunts. Mare flicks her tail. The draw knife winks. The hot shoes hiss. He rasps the hoof and clenches the neat equator of the nails. And in the stink of horn, he's hungry, but it's near an hour before he slaps her shoulder, nods to the lad. The mare blocks out the sunlight as she leaves. New iron on cobbles. Back to work. Tom sits down on the bench, unwraps his bait. He chews and is aware just now of how the sun, in an odd trick, is spelling time to turn a man from cartwright to mechanic.
Thanks, Jean. Here we go. You can have a look at the illustration on this one. I'll try and keep my fingers out of the way. Again, the same thing with the polychromos pencils and the same coarse-grained paper. What I meant to say before was I made the frontispiece for the book, just a straightforward picture of the Georgina Jackson's book. And if anyone wants to know, you can use, because they're oil-based pencils, you can actually use turpentine to sort of melt the oil a bit, and so you get a sort of glow with them. But that's just by the way. So again, it goes for what I was saying about the research, because I don't know what a 1930s, 40s oil can looks like. And neither do I know what the jack looks like, but people will look at this, and if I don't get it right, they'll say, and so I hate that. So I tried my best. So let me explain the image. Okay, so we've got the horse going one way, and we've got the van going the other way, and it's that point that Jean's talking about, where we're sort of going for progress, and the cartwrights are having to become mechanics, and that's that moment in time. The forges always used to be really dark and warm and lovely. You can feel yourself dropping off. So the idea is that here you are in the dark, eating your lunch, looking out, and it's really bright, you know, really bright. So all you can see is the two large bulks ahead of you. So the oil can is meant to be the sundial, showing the time passing. And you've got the horseshoes over one side, and then you've got the mechanic-y things, technical terms, over the other side with the clock, just as a nod. We did crop it, zoom it in a bit when we were doing it. Okay, and then we've got fire buckets and things. So it's it was a delight to illustrate this book. Anyway, thanks, Jean.
Great stuff. I love that. I love the oil can sundial. The last poem we're going to read you is called Barley Child. A barley child is a child born in wedlock, but which makes its advent within 6 months of marriage, as barley is 6 months between sowing and harvesting. This word was collected in Much Wenlock and Acton Burnell, where clearly these things went on. Barley child. The bride a little rounded on her wedding day, and not in white, and not in church either. She endures the shame of the registry office, the tight-mouthed in-laws, the let-out seams. I do, she says, and feels a weak relief as well as nausea. Around her glasses clink, and she looks away fast from the best man's knowing nudge to her new husband's ribs, and all are grinning. In the lane, a green spikelet sticks to the sole of her new caught shoe. There are overhead messages passing in the wires, telegraph post to post. They find the car, go home to the in-laws' attic. These things happen in the countryside and in the town, down Dark Lane and down Lovers Lane. And when the baby comes, it's all made right. It's like a pact. No one mentions it again, at least not to her face. So Steve is born in wedlock, after all, and why dredge up the past? He's 35 before his own wife works it out for him. He can't see why it mattered. His wife looks at her ma-in-law with something like respect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. This was my favourite image to work on in the book. So it's quite a dramatic image. Okay, so I started going about it thinking, what am I going to do for this? There's a lot of different ways to go. So I did some drawings of that green spikelet that Jean was talking about, just to get my head around the barley. So I knew what barley looked like, so then I could do things with the barley. So then I did another, a spindly little sketch about what was going on, and I was thinking about it. When I'm drawing, I listen to music sometimes, or sometimes, rarely now, I listen to a radio programme. So I was listening to all about COVID cytokine storms when I was making this, of which I think is why it looks really dramatic, because I was thinking, oh, oh no. So the whole thing is about memory, really. The telegraph posts, and this is what Jean, I picked up on the overhead, there are overhead messages passing in the wires. I used to spend a lot of time in the back of a car when I was little, watching the telegraph poles race up and down as you go along. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. So that was my memory here, was the memory of making it. And there was the memory of people going home that night after the wedding. And there's the memory of the bride. I saw the baby being conceived perhaps in the barley field, which is why we're so close up to the barley. So this was another image I did in colour pencil, and then I used some digital app to oomph it up a little bit. I think that's all I want to say about that. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both so much. That was fantastic. So that's it, everyone. Thank you all so very much for coming. And I should have said earlier, happy World Poetry Day. We are also so lucky to have had your attention on World Poetry Day. And anyway, and I'd like to thank you to John Sewell, Carl Tomlinson, Steve Griffiths, Jean Atkin, and Katy Alston. That was fantastic. I certainly enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did. I'm going to hope that Deb Ulmer is out there, but and hopefully she'll unmute in a minute. But even if she isn't, I just want to say that
she is.
Hooray! Hi, Deb. So fantastic. So I just want to say that Deb has kindly invited Fair Acre Press to run a live event at the Poetry Pharmacy in Bishop's Castle as soon as it's feasible. And also that I am planning another Zoom event soon, possibly Sunday the 25th of April, but anyway, watch out for that information. I've put in the chat again the book links, but obviously all you need to do is Google the name of the book or go to Fair Acre Press shop and you'll find them all. And also I'd like to say that the Poetry Pharmacy has signed copies of Fan-peckled to buy, and that's it for me. And please, Deb, I'd like you to say something about the Poetry Pharmacy, how things are going and everything.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, Nadia. I kind of, I think most of you here I know really well, and you're all really good friends of the Poetry Pharmacy, so I don't need to describe what it is, except that this is such an important book for us, I think. You know, it's my three dear friends, you three, and in one book, how wonderful. It's Shropshire, so many